Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Hardware Podcast. My name's Jackson Danner alongside my good friend Omar Borja. Today we're going to be previewing next week's action as well as going over some of last week's, just as it is every week. But Omar, you have quite the weekend ahead of you. If you want to tell our listeners a little bit about that. You are a regular Kirk Herbstreit on your jet, except it's Frontier Airlines instead. I don't believe you're taking your dog with you. I don't think you have one either. But and not taking Big Ben. But where are you traveling to? Where are you going to?
So this weekend I'll be going to Notre Dame Navy. It's a shame. Wanted to take my wife and everything, but I'd have to ride a red-eye flight, and that's not her favorite thing to do. So instead, I will be enjoying Notre Dame Navy in the without her. But this is I've made it a goal to go to every Notre Dame Navy game that is in a different NFL stadium. So definitely not the tallest task. I'm no Mike Barker CFB campus tour. I do have my modest goals, and that is one of them. So I get to check off another one, MetLife Stadium as a site for Notre Dame Navy. I hope to see Army Navy there. I think it's 2026 when Army plays Navy at MetLife Stadium. So hopefully the first of two.
25th anniversary of 9/11, right? I think it's what it's for.
Oh wow, I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
didn't even
remember
think
seeing
about
something
that.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't because I know they did the 20th anniversary of 9/11 at MetLife Stadium. But yeah, so I'll be there, and it just happened like it was a plan before this year to go to this game. Um, excuse me, but yeah, like it just makes it even better that it's the second time since 1978, since the Jimmy Carter administration, that both teams are ranked, and yeah, just an amazing event, really.
No, I'm excited for you. It's going to be a lot of fun. Two very big games in the greater New York City area. One of the other of which we'll preview shortly. But no, it's going to be a great game. We're already getting sidetracked, but I want to ask, if we see Notre Dame, or no, excuse me, if we see Army Navy as a conference championship back-to-back weeks. I'm just asking, how cool would it be, obviously, from a storyline standpoint? And that's going to be like the most expensive conference championship game ticket in like history, probably. But what are the like legitimate implications for the college football playoff? Like, will that second game mean anything if it does? I don't want to jinx it. I think we're all hoping for it. But what are the like true logistical implications of playing the same school back to back in postseason play?
So, as an agreement that was agreed upon after I guess after the 12 team playoff was I guess enacted. So the second Army Navy game would not count against or for Army or Navy if it came down to the situation, which makes it awkward for all
Yeah.
parties.
Yeah.
Awkward for Army and Navy fans playing twice in a row. Awkward as well, and probably aggravating for maybe Boise State fans in this situation. Probably actually have Boise State or UNLV fans in this situation. If they win their conference championship game, they do everything they have to do, but the American champion loses their non-conference game the next week. So yeah, it does not count. It just makes and the best word I can use to describe the whole situation with Army and Navy in the same conference is awkward. Like really, because I wanted Army to be in a conference to join a conference, but I always thought the MAC was a good fit simply because of situations like this. But what can you do? Really? Like what can you do?
Would we realistically see any shot of them resting guys if it was a true like meaningless Army Navy game? Because Selection Sunday is the Sunday before, right? So it's not even like you can have like an unconscious bias of the game counting. Like, no, it is decided before. It has no meaning. This is a scrimmage essentially. Well, is that something you think you follow Army football more than I do? Do you think that's something we could see if it came down to it?
Absolutely not. Army Navy. The Army Navy game is any game against Navy is more important than the playoff, and Navy fans can tell you the same. Navy players will probably tell you the same exact thing that, play beating Navy or beating Army, beating Navy is more important than winning the playoff or winning a first round game and going to a quarterfinal game. That's just bottom line up front.
It would no, that makes sense, and that's also like the right answer, right? But like I mean you have the chance to beat Navy any year. Like come on, this is a college football playoff. There's none of that?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Man, interesting. Man. Nice. That's truly unique for that specific rivalry because I don't think most would say that. So cool. Well, Omar, there were a couple things that we wanted to talk about. I'll let you lead off with as far as Blake Horvath's Heisman chances. What's your take on that? You're gonna be there firsthand, so tell us what your thoughts are.
So I think, excuse me, I think Blake Horvath has an outstanding chance to get his name on the Heisman ballot, or at least on a lot of writers' Heisman ballots during this year. Because if you think about it, Notre Dame, he's playing on ABC, so that's a very high visibility game that he'll be playing in. Yeah,
Is this the first non-SEC game on ABC since the SEC on ABC became an institution?
no, so it's going to be the
I was-
second, the third
Okay.
actually.
I thought maybe there was one other, but I was struggling to think of it. And I know there hasn't been really more than that. So this is the second.
Yeah, it's the second
Okay.
one. Well, third if you count the Miak Swag Challenge in week 0. I choose not to count that one because that
Yeah,
is a dedicated week, not to discount the classic at all, but it's just week 0.
that and there's no SEC action week zero. So I would agree with that.
So
Um,
yeah, it is a second game, but it's on ABC. Going to be high visibility for sure. After all, when Navy played Air Force on CBS earlier this year, got I think 1.2 million viewers in the noon slot against other Power Five games and a CW game on network TV. So definitely a high visibility game for Horvath. And people are already starting. They're like people are starting to give Bryson Daly and Blake Horvath national honors against, I'm not going to say lesser competition, but against non-power four competition. And so if the national media, if the Davy O'Brien Award, if the Peyton Manning Award, if all these awards are giving national honors to say Bryson Daly, Blake Horvath against their conference mates, if he performs big enough against Notre Dame, that will definitely put him on the radar despite playing for Navy or playing in the American Athletic Conference. I mean, I know you said it on our last episode that there is not space for more than one group of five candidate, but I think there's plenty of space this year because none of the candidates have really wowed anyone, I think. Like Cam Ward's amazing. He's doing an amazing job this year. But I think a lot of the narrative is Miami getting bailed out in late game situations by poor officiating for Dillon Gabriel. Dillon Gabriel had an outstanding game against Ohio State. So I would take Dillon Gabriel in the Heisman race over Cam Ward, which we'll talk about later on. But I mean, other than that, there really hasn't been a narrative or a sort of a best player on the best team argument, really, for the Heisman that in normal years would prevent a guy like Blake Horvath or Bryson Daly from taking a spot in the Heisman race. So I think with a big game against Notre Dame, like you got to put him in the top three. Like you got to put him in the top 3 or 4 behind Cam Ward. I'd say above Travis Hunter at this point too. Actually,
it's gonna be tough. Now the only benefit you might get is that it's a little bit he's a little bit more likable than Travis Hunter, and not against Travis, nothing against Travis Hunter at all. Like he's a great dude. I think he's anyone that knows anything about him personally likes him a lot, right? But it's like I think everyone's just kind of sick about talking about Colorado after last year. And so it's easy to hate on Colorado. You even got a little clip of I forget exactly what it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, of Obama saying I think they only have 2 good players or something like that. And Dion was like, "Come on, man! Like it's a deeper roster than that." But it's I think we're all a little bit tired of talking about it. Um, and so it's gonna be a better storyline or a more likable storyline to go with Blake Horvath. So but I think anyone other than Ashton Genty at 1 is a travesty to it, right? But for maybe the first quarterback spot, I want to talk about two guys, Dillon Gabriel and Cam Ward. If you're listening to this show, you're obviously familiar with who they are. But who do you think has the upper hand right now? Where do they stand in the rankings? Who do you think has maybe a little bit more on the table to get? What are you feeling?
So I think Dillon Gabriel has the better win, really. I think Dillon Gabriel's resume of beating Ohio State and then beating, who knows, maybe 11-1 Indiana or beating Ohio State again in the Big Ten title game is good enough, honestly. It's a better resume than Cam Ward right now. Cam Ward might have better stats, true, but I think right now as it stands, like Dillon Gabriel has a Heisman moment against Ohio State, his game-winning drive and touchdown against the Buckeyes. And I mean, I just think the competition, as much as I hate to say it, with as we grow closer to a Big Two divide, then the competition's better, really, because Dillon Gabriel, the toughest game that Oregon really had was against Boise State compared to Miami, where they're struggling against Louisville one week. They're struggling against Cal
Yeah,
another week.
Omar, the Idaho pass rush with like a word.
That is true. That is true. And maybe that holds him back. Yeah, like I was thinking that too, that Idaho was the second toughest game as well. I mean, but maybe that holds him back. But I think him rising to the occasion against Ohio State just really helped his campaign a lot. And I mean, with Miami, like the ACC, I need to see how he performs against Clemson and Cade Klubnik. I mean, I'm not writing off any team right now, but seeing them against Clemson or against Pitt later on in the season, I think those are two key games that can help Cam Ward's campaign a lot. But right now, Dillon Gabriel has it for me. And also, too, speaking of Clemson, like we're not talking about Cade Klubnik. Cade Klubnik is having an amazing year against ACC play, but the Georgia game is holding him back. Like it really is.
I think it's going to take a very, very long time for anyone to get that taste out of their mouths because that was their most highly televised game. I think it was week one, right? Noon slot for ABC. I think it's going to be a while before anyone gets over that. One other quarterback that I just want to mention that no one is talking about at all in the Heisman race. But if his name comes up before Thanksgiving weekend, man, what a showdown it would be. Kyle McCord, man. Syracuse is 5-1. They've had a fantastic year. We talked earlier in the year on the podcast about how, the joke was made about sending Ryan Day a bottle of champagne for letting Syracuse get him. But man, Thanksgiving weekend, they play Miami. If these end up being the two best quarterbacks, which Dillon Gabriel obviously is looking second best right now, if not first. But if Kyle McCord can kind of sneak his way in there, you're looking at a Cam Ward, Kyle McCord rivalry weekend showdown. I think that would be, man, talk about fun. That would be amazing for an unconventional matchup that has a lot of meaning that late in the year. What do you think? Could McCord sneak his way in there?
See, I would like to think so, but I think the loss against Stanford is, again, like you said, a bad taste in everyone's mouth. Losing to Stanford in a high visibility game, a Friday night game at home, mind you, with the year that Stanford's having, when, say, Riley Leonard had an even more outstanding game against the Stanford Cardinal, I really think that's going to leave a bad taste in everyone's mouth still. But maybe a win against Miami could reverse that. I just don't see him winning with that. Maybe he gets in the top 10 if he beats Miami and performs well. But I just think the Stanford game is too much of a hurdle.
If he wins on the road in Pittsburgh this Thursday night, does that move the needle for anyone, you think?
No,
Matt Barry, Dan
because
Mullen on the call, probably. Well, like, what do you think?
No, because I don't. There's not much buzz with Eli Holstein and Pitt, and Pitt's been getting a lot of disrespect. Really, they are 6-0. They've done everything they could. I mean, there's just a ton of disrespect for Pitt. Pitt isn't really the sexiest team right now, and so Eli Holstein's having an amazing year in the ACC, but no one's really generating Heisman buzz for him. So I'm gonna say no because I don't think a lot of the country are taking Pitt seriously. Like they're 6-0 and they're number 19 in the country compared to like Iowa State, who's also 6-0 and is ninth in the country. Like Yeah, I find it hard to believe that it'll move the needle for either Holstein or McCord.
The thing with Pitt or the thing about Pitt with me is like they have won a lot of close games where they've either we don't quite know if they've had to play up yet, but they've definitely played down to opponents, right? They played West Virginia, won by 4 points. It was 38-34. They also just last week played Cal, who's not looking as good as we originally thought. They won 17-15, right? So like they've won some ugly games. It matters how you win them in college football, right? This is in the NFL, so I don't know. I can't seem I can't quite make much of Pitt, but dude, they have Clemson, they have Louisville on the schedule. Obviously they play Syracuse Thursday night. Like they still have like three legitimately tough games left on the schedule. I'm very curious what we're thinking of Pitt after those. So, one last thing before we get our players of the weeks, or before we get to our players of the week. Kayvon Britten of Tarleton State. Tell us a little bit about the curse that he might have broken.
So I wouldn't say he's broken it just yet, but Kayvon Britten is having an outstanding year. Some might say he's Ashton Genty of the FCS, or some might say that Ashton Genty is a Kayvon Britten of the FBS. But Kayvon Britten right now has 158 carries for 1,160 yards and 12 touchdowns in 7 games for Tarleton State, and he can easily break, I think, 2,000 yards for sure. He's a little bit past the halfway mark in a 12-game season, but he's just doing an outstanding job right now. And a running back has not won the Walter Payton Award since I think '02. But right now, Tarleton State is undefeated in against FCS play, which is really what matters to voters and to pollsters. But they're undefeated against FCS play, 6-1 right now. They lost their lone losses to Baylor, a Big 12 school. But I think Kayvon Britten honestly can break the curse for the Walter Payton Awards running back drought. And how ironic is it that the Walter Payton Award, named after one of the greatest running backs of all time, has not had a running back win it since 2002. But looking at his remaining schedule, and it's interesting about the Walter Payton Award being less about publicity than the Heisman is, but he's got Austin P, Eastern Kentucky, West Georgia, Abilene Christian, and Central Arkansas are the two toughest games in their schedule. Those are two teams that have spent time in the FCS polls this year, spent significant time actually. Central Arkansas, I think, is in top 15, I want to say, and Abilene Christian beat them and had just entered the polls the past week. But those two games, I think, are make or break games for Kayvon Britten's Walter Payton campaign. So this might just be the year of the running back.
If you were curious, the FCS rushing record, if a quick Google search has led me to the correct answer, it's Terrence West from Towson, 2,519 yards, which is just hard to believe, just saying that out loud, from 2013. Is he on pace to break 2,500?
I think with playoffs, I think Terrence West in that year with
Okay.
Towson went to the FCS title game. So I think that
Okay.
padded his stats a bit. But
Okay.
with playoffs, I think that's possible.
Yeah, yeah, we've seen crazier things happen. So yeah, that would be awesome to see. You see, yeah, there are a decent number of guys that have gone over 2,000 yards in the FCS. Jamal Branch, in the 2000s. No one from the 2020s has done it yet. Jaden Shurtis got the closest. So nice. Well, we will go ahead and go with our players of the week from last week. Omar, who was your guy on offense that you wanted to highlight?
So my guy on offense, it's crazy it's taking this long, but I'm gonna go Bryson Daly on offense for Army.
Hmm.
He became the first player since Elmer Oliphant in 1914 to have 6 touchdowns for Army. In this past week's game against East Carolina, who was the first player with 5 rush touchdowns and a pass touchdown in Army history. Threw for 147 yards. He has shown so much improvement passing the ball this year. 7 of 10, 147 yards and ran the ball 31 times for 171 yards and 5 touchdowns. Right now, he leads the country in rushing touchdowns. I think he's 3 ahead of Ashton Genty. We'll see how long that lasts. But Bryson Daly, I think with the track record he has right now, Army playing 7 games, 19 touchdowns. He's on pace for 30 rush touchdowns. Should Army play in the conference title game at least, if you give him 6 games and less than 2 touchdowns per game, even now I think he right now he is on pace for 30 rush touchdowns, which a little bit short of the record, but an impressive year for a quarterback of all positions. And keep in mind, like we talked about earlier, Army and Navy are still in the playoff race. Army plays Notre Dame on November 23rd on NBC on primetime. Big Saturday night game. The song will be playing and everything. I think Bryson Daly is a legitimate Heisman Trophy candidate. I'm not just saying that because I'm an Army fan, but just the stats he's putting up, passing the ball and everything. I think he's up to 25 or 27 touchdowns accounted for with passing and everything. So Bryson Daly gets my Player of the Week nod, finally recognizing the Black Knight on hardware.
Yeah, I'm surprised it took this long, but very well deserved. From pretty close to the from the beginning of the year, well deserved. So glad we're finally highlighting him a little bit. My offensive player of the week from last week was Harvard quarterback Jaden Craig, and just an absolute thrilling 35-34 win over Holy Cross. Jaden was 20 for 25 with 3 touchdowns. He is not a scrambler by any means, but his pocket awareness is some of the best I've watched all year at any level. He really knows when to step up. He's not oblivious to his surroundings, and he keeps his eyes downfield the entire time. It's impressive to watch. He's had multiple touchdowns in all but one game so far. He's only thrown 1 pick on the year. Another part that's fascinating about his game is you see just in all levels of football, but you see it a lot of times in the FCS as well. Just using play action to get some easy, cheap completions and maybe it passes the stats a little bit, right? Well, performance wise or statistics wise, Jaden Craig actually performs better without play action than with. Without play action on the year, he's 82 for 95. Or excuse me, no. He's 53 for 82, 11 touchdowns, no interceptions. With play action, he's 21 for 37, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. So he really is genuinely at his best when he's dropping back, reading the field, and not having to do anything else, mid snap or pre snap. So he's not relying on easy gifts from the defense, right? He's just making the right decisions and making them decisively and being aware of his surroundings. So Jaden Craig, it's a really great Ivy League race this year. Definitely going to be a name to keep an eye on.
Yeah, so Jaden Craig and Harvard, it's interesting that their offense looks completely different. Or at least has like a different philosophy to it from the quarterback position. Last year, Charles DiPrima, great scrambler. Color commentator Jack Ford of Ivy League Friday Nights has called him allegedly the fastest player in the Ivy League. He was quarterback last year and just was an amazing runner. He plays wide receiver now, runs some Wildcats. I know they have pocket passer Jaden Craig, and Craig, like you said, just a pure passer, a great pocket, a great pocket awareness and everything. Just gives that Harvard offense a different look, and they can play the play action game if they want. They have a great running back in Shane McLaughlin, but
But
they
they
don't
don't
have
have to
to.
rely on it.
Yeah, they don't have to rely on it, which is amazing. Which I'm surprised at this point that Harvard lost to Brown. And it just, like you said, that loss to Brown makes the Ivy League race even more interesting than it already is, because we might have our first 2 conference loss Ivy League champion since I think it was like 1982. I'd have to do the research, but it's been since the early 80s, which we'll talk about more with our games of the week.
Are we including ties, conference champion ties with that, or is that the first? Would that
Um,
be the first outright winner since the 80s?
I think ties as well. I think
Really?
ties as well. Yeah. I think ties as well. So yeah, so just an interesting race. So many teams are in it. There's just a lot of parity in the Ivy League this year, and it's just great to see, really. Staying in the Northeast, but not in the Ivy League with my defensive player of the week, I have Xavier Holmes of Maine, who had a great game, and not exactly with the really sexy stats on defense that people say. See, he's an edge rusher, outside linebacker for the Black Bears. He had 1.5 TFLs, but he had 5 quarterback hurries against Villanova in their upset win over the number 5 team in the FCS. And they just decisively blew out Villanova in that game. They looked like the better team throughout. in the 35-7 win. And so Maine in a couple weeks too, they'll have a great chance at the spotlight as they travel all the way down to Norman to play Oklahoma. And I mean, Maine fans, like Maine has some crazy like road games the next few years. Like they have Georgia Southern, I think. I think they play Florida International. But this time they go to Norman, Oklahoma on the SEC Network, maybe SEC Network Plus, and they get to play the Oklahoma Sooners. And Oklahoma's got some problems on offense, and Xavier Holmes can make a great name for himself, excuse me, to pro scouts and all-star game scouts as well, and to the country as well against Oklahoma in a couple weeks. So Xavier Holmes is a name to watch, and I'm not saying that Oklahoma's going to lose to Maine, but I wouldn't be surprised if Maine catches the Sooners sleeping.
Yeah, Oklahoma, man. Like, I wonder how many OU fans are just regretting making the moves to the SEC because that's been brutal, man. And like I wasn't like rooting for their downfall by any means, but like man, it's when you compare it to how good Texas has looked, and yeah, I know they're coming off of, a loss against Georgia, but I feel like a lot of people saw that coming. Anyways, I want to get sidetracked. No, that's awesome. Awesome for him. Hopefully he gets that performs well under the spotlight that's going to be the SEC Network Plus. um for my defensive player of the week from last week, Kobe Bryant, the corner from Kansas. We've talked about him a few times, I believe, on the show. So last week he was targeted 6 times, right? He had 3 interceptions and 1 pass breakup. I think that's good, Omar. I don't know. I'm not as much of a defense guy, but man, Kobe has played fantastic. He's not thrown at often for a reason. The leader for interceptions all year, which he's tied for, is 4 interceptions. He's one away from that just in one game. So no, he's played fantastic. The only like legit coaches film that I had access to or have access to is against Oklahoma State from last year. It's really interesting to watch him play. Obviously, a wide corner, but you see just a lot of like deliberate streak routes to maybe get him away from like screens and all sorts of things. Like there'll be a screen and they'll send a receiver like running downfield just to get him like away from the play. They won't even like block him, right? And just stuff like that, which is really, really interesting. And fantastic player. He's going to be great at the next level. But it is fun to watch in the meantime. Definitely the bright spot on a Kansas team because Kansas has not been what we thought they would be this year. So
Yeah, like you said, Kansas has not been what we've expected them to be this year, but man, Kobe Bryant just having a great year at the corner position. There's the 3 interceptions too. That's just mind-boggling too that they would
yeah,
test him that much. Like it's really
6 times,
mind-boggling.
dude. It's not like they were throwing at him a ton,
Yeah.
right? Like he played. I've got the report pulled up in front of me. He had 44 coverage snaps. So when you take that into consideration, six isn't a ridiculous amount, and you still got 3 picks out of it. It's insane.
Yeah, like I don't even know what to make of that. But yeah, like you said, like it's just interesting too to hear you say that they run the streaks to take him out of the play. And that sounds like more teams need to do that after the performance he had this past week. And it's interesting too because that wastes the route, I feel like that wastes an option. Not really waste, but it takes an option out of the play and really forces teams to play 10 on 10.
Yeah, yeah. If you take away like if you just pretend that, whatever, I mean, teams did it with Darrell Revis. I'm not repairing him to Revis Island, right? But like, if you just like pretend whatever receiver is on him doesn't exist, right? Then like you said, you're playing 10 on 10 and it's a different dynamic and different game planning. But I don't know, maybe that's what teams have to do because it's just, he's only gotten better throughout the year. So
Yeah, exactly. But it's just great to see for sure. Going on to the HBCU players of the week. So for mine, I have Karate Brenson. Not sure if I pronounced the first name right. It is spelled like the martial art, but he had 5 catches for 153 yards, including an 83-yard catch, spoiling Howard's 100th homecoming out there in DC. And for part of his efforts for Tennessee State, the Tigers got voted into the top 25 for the first time since 2017. And the Tigers have a path to win the Ohio Valley Conference. Right now they have one loss. They are 5-2 right now, but they in the last month of the season, excuse me, they have UT Martin, a favorite in the Big South Ohio Valley, and they have Southeast Missouri State, who is undefeated in FCS play. They're 7-1. They had a one-score loss to New Mexico State, but they're 7-1, and they could easily make the playoffs if they win out. If either by way of shared Big South OVC title or through an at-large bid, which I think their resume is good enough for an at-large bid as it stands right now. But a note on Brenton, great wide receiver. He is an underclassman. His quarterback though, Draylon Ellis, definitely looks like a candidate to not just play in Nollins for the HBCU Legacy Bowl, but also for other All-Star games like the Hula Bowl, uh, the Shrine Bowl even as well. Even though the Shrine Bowl does not have an agreement or not have, I guess, a developmental kind of agreement with the SWAT or with the Ohio Valley Conference, they do love their HBCU players. So it would be interesting to see Draylon Ellis play in the Shrine Bowl or at least the Hula Bowl. But he's having a great year for the Tigers. But Karate Brenton having a great year. He's at, I think, over 500 yards receiving and just continuing for a really one of the better stories out there in Nashville with Eddie George finally putting things together in his fourth year. It's great to see a slow build pay off.
It is, and so many schools and programs just getting impatient quickly, right? And they've stuck by him, and then it's good to see that it's finally yielding some results because it definitely wasn't there immediately like some had hoped, and it's been great to see. For my HBCU player of the week, this was actually my week 8 player of the week. We had both done our prep. Schedules didn't match up where we could record. He had another fantastic game and a win, so I'm just gonna keep him since we didn't get to show him love last week. But Kelby Givens, the defensive end from Southern University, Kelby has come up big when it matters the most. So 2 weeks ago, what initially caught my eyes to him, he had 8 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and 1 quarterback hurry in an overtime win versus Texas Southern. The quarterback hurry came up on a 3rd and 11, and then he had another TFL when Texas Southern was on really like the cusp of field goal range. Given stopped them in the backfield for a loss, took him out of field goal range. So he came up big when it mattered most. This week, he had another 1.5 tackles for loss and a forced fumble in a 10-point win against Alcorn State. He had back-to-back tackles on 3rd and 4th down on the possession before Southern just kneeled the ball through the end of the game, right? So we talk a lot about edge rushers playing big in big moments. Kelby has been the standard for that in the SWAC and just something that's been fun to watch. And man, if he keeps putting on a show like this, hopefully they don't have close games every week, right? But for him to see an edge rusher put games away is just so satisfying. And he's done that multiple times now.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the edge rushers out on the SWAC are having a great year. I don't know if you saw any of the Jackson State, Florida A&M game, but talk about an edge rusher making an impact with the sack on Daniel Richardson and the subsequent fumble return. And there's fourth quarter meltdowns. I said this on Twitter. There's fourth quarter meltdowns, and there's whatever Florida A&M did this past week against Jackson State to essentially, it's a little bit too soon to tell, but essentially give Jackson State the SWAC East, which time's running out for Florida A&M, but it's tough because now Jackson State has a tiebreaker over the Rattlers. But yeah, I mean, edge rushers in the SWAC making a difference in the conference. And what's new? Jordan Lewis right there, the Buck Buchanan winner in the spring 2021 season. Like,
Yeah.
what's new?
Yeah, it's absolutely we're used to seeing Southern have great defensive ends. So
Yeah. Exactly, right about that. So, going on to our FCS games of the week, starting off with my first one. I'm starting with Friday night, of course, Ivy League Friday night. And coming off strong ratings a couple weeks ago, we had Cornell Harvard. This past week, we had just a great Princeton versus Brown game, which as each week passes, Brown's win over Harvard looks more fluky. But James Perry is doing a great job with the Brown Bears. It is not an easy job, and the program out in Providence has stuck with him. This week, we have Penn Yale. We have Yale playing Penn at venerable Franklin Field. And we just have a matchup between a great offense for Yale, but also an opportunistic an offense hoping to take advantage of a poor Yale defense because Yale scores 33 points per game, but they also allow 33 points per game. A guy for Yale that I like a lot is David Pantelis. He has 355 yards receiving, 4 touchdowns. He also returns punts for the Bulldogs, and he could find his way onto a roster, onto an NFL roster in the preseason, onto a UFL roster, just with the versatility in the return game, just a reliable target for the Bulldogs. For Penn, they have one of the best and most underrated running backs in the FCS in Malachi Hosley, who has 585 rushing yards in 5 games and 5 touchdowns. And he's complemented by Aiden Sane, a veteran quarterback out in Philadelphia, averaging over 200 yards per game for the Quakers. So I expect there to be plenty of points on Friday night with this game. And who knows? Penn is 0-2 right now in the Ivy League. Yale has 1 loss, right? So if Penn beats Yale, that just makes this Ivy League race even more insane because we're going to run out of 1 loss Ivy League teams. And so something's going to have to give to potentially give us that first 2 conference loss Ivy League champions since the early 80s.
With my first game of the week to watch, I'm going to stick with the theme of Friday Night Football and go with Boise State at UNLV, 10:30 on the CBS Sports Network. So you're gonna have to flip over after the Ivy League Friday night. I don't think there's been two group of five teams with larger spotlights on them than these two. One for a great reason, and Ashton Jeanty, with the historic season that he's having, I genuinely can't remember the last time that a group of five player was the betting favorite to win the Heisman. And then the spotlight on UNLV was really for all the wrong reasons. The Matt Sluka saga, where he didn't get the $100,000 in NIL funds that he was allegedly verbally promised. What frustrates me is that all the attention was on them. They proceed to outscore opponents 183 to 114 without Sluka, only suffering a loss to a one-loss Syracuse team. And you don't hear a peep from the national media about UNLV beyond that, right? So I think UNLV has a lot to prove. They're the 20th best rushing defense in the nation, and definitely going to be the best that Boise State has faced all year. They're number 3 in the FBS in turnover margin. They have linebacker Jackson Woodard, who Brock talked about when he guested on the show. He has 8.5 tackles for losses and 4 interceptions on the year. They have safety Jalen Catalon, the Arkansas transfer, with another 4 interceptions and 55 tackles, which is second best behind Woodard. And an edge rusher, Antonio Doyle Jr., has 4 sacks and 4 more pressures. This is a really solid UNLV defense that's complemented by a rushing offense that's really nothing to be slept on. They're not the name prowess of Boise State in the backfield with Ashton Jeanty, but they have a running quarterback in Hajj Malik Williams is averaging 65 yards a game. Then they have 3 running backs with at least 30 carries on the squad, so more running back by committee. Receiving wise, it is all star power. It is all Ricky White third. He has more receiving touchdowns than the rest of the team combined. He's the 3rd highest graded wide receiver on PFF. Don't let him loose against the free safety. He averages 11 yards per route ran, not per reception, per route ran when running to the deep left. UNLV also has elite special teams. They've blocked 4 punts on the year. Next best in the country has only blocked 2. As far as Boise State, I spent a lot of time talking about how effective UNLV's defense is. No team in the country has more sacks than Boise State. They're averaging almost 5 a game. Ashton Jeanty obviously is going to get all the headlines, but this offensive line has been great despite a ton of turnover. The left side of that offensive line has been steady with Cage Casey and Ben Dooley starting every game. And then from the center and the right side of the line, they've had at least 2 different starters on the year for each position. They've made it work. But man, I can't wait for this game. I'm going to have to make a couple coffees and enjoy this one while you're on your red eye flight, because this is a very late kick here on the East Coast. But man, the key for UNLV, it's just going to be ending drives and touchdowns. No one kicks more field goals on average per game than the Rebels. It's not a great formula for beating Boise State, right? You got to end drives and touchdowns. So that's really the main thing to look for.
Yeah, so things could definitely get very interesting in the Mountain West if whoever wins this one ends up losing the conference title game to presumably each other. I'm not going to rule out any of the other contenders like San Jose State or Fresno State, but San Jose State had a bad loss to Colorado State, lowering their stock a bit. Fresno State at times this year, I mean, Fresno State does not even have to head that tiebreaker over UNLV. Excuse me, is out of the tiebreaker over UNLV, and they lost in blowout fashion. So those two contenders are sort of lagging behind UNLV and Boise State. I don't want to disrespect those programs, but it seems like the road to the Mountain West runs through Boise and UNLV, and things could get interesting. I think the best hope for the Mountain West in terms of the playoff is for whoever wins this game to sweep the season series because a two loss Mountain West team, I don't think has a good argument against, say, Army or Navy winning the American with either, I guess, with no losses, yeah, undefeated with no losses and a win over Notre Dame. So I think the league definitely needs, and they both have competing resumes with the Army and Navy, where Boise State lost to Oregon on a last second field goal. And Boise State beat a Washington State team that could very well end up at 11-1. And then UNLV has 3 wins against power conference teams right now. They beat Oregon State, they beat Kansas, they beat Houston. So they beat those 3 schools, but none of those schools are really or sorry, not even New Year's Six, but playoff contenders. So really, definitely, I just never imagined that this game would have such huge implications. And of course, this being the Mountain West title game rematch from last year.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say that like if you had told us in the beginning of the year that this had big implications, we wouldn't have known it. Like I think a lot of us could have seen this coming at least, but it would have been definitely for different reasons. We probably didn't think that Boise State would have the Heisman front runner, even though Ashton Genty was highly sought after. And we definitely thought Matt Schluka would be starting, or if he wasn't going to be starting, that wouldn't be for the reason he wasn't. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, this one, there really isn't anything else that we can say that, or at least that I can say that hasn't been said by you or any of the other experts. So, going on to my next game, I'm gonna go with Bucknell at Georgetown. And I know I rode heavily the Georgetown hype train in terms of them winning their first Patriot League title and or not first, sorry, but making their first playoff appearance. They had a bit of a setback last week against Colgate, losing 38-28. But there's still a chance for the Hoyas and also Bucknell to make their first FCS playoff appearance. And it starts with this game. This game kind of serves as a bit of an elimination game. The Patriot League just has 7 teams. They'll have 8 next year. But with 7 teams, they only play 6 conference games. And to be quite honest, this might be both teams' best chance to win the Patriot League before Richmond joins the league in 2025 from the Coastal Athletic Association, of course, that great league that is pretty much the class of the East in the FCS. But both teams right now are looking good. They've looked good, I'd say good in non-conference play. Bucknell's 3-4. Excuse me, they're 3-4, and they notched a couple wins in non-conference play as well as a win against Lehigh on the road. And quarterbacking Bucknell is another All-Star game candidate in Ralph Rucker the fourth. And Oklahoma fans might remember his face for his 2 completed passes in 2021 in the 76 to nothing rout against Western Carolina. Just kidding, they probably don't remember him. But Ralph Rucker is having a great year at quarterback. Last year, he was great. He doesn't make many mistakes throwing the ball. He threw for over 2,500 yards in 2023 in 11 games, over 200 yards per game. This year's picked up where he left off, averaging less than 200 yards per game but still playing low mistake football, having 11 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. And he faces a Georgetown defense that is opportunistic, that had a few interceptions against Lafayette a couple of weeks ago. And on Georgetown, they have a great wide receiver in Jimmy Kibble, who I previously made a player of the week earlier in the season. But Jimmy Kibble, it's live with him every week. Jimmy Kibble live. He has 587 yards so far on 36 catches and 3 touchdowns. But this game could be an elimination game. And I think the key point for both schools is the fact that they both have Holy Cross still remaining on their schedule, where it looks like the Patriot League is going to run through Worcester once again, even though the Crusaders have had a rough non-conference schedule. But the road still runs through Holy Cross, it looks like. But it starts here. This game is a bit of an elimination game. And Bucknell and Georgetown making the FCS playoffs would be one of the best stories of the season, bottom line up front.
For my next game of the week to watch, I'm gonna go with Dartmouth at Columbia, which is the other greater New York City area football game that I was referring to earlier. So a friendly reminder for those listening but may not remember or follow Ivy League football as closely as we do. The regular season matters the most in the Ivy League because schools are banned from postseason play. There's no conference championship game, there's no playoffs. So the regular season is the absolute end all be all. So in that case, number one versus number two in conference obviously has major implications. That's what we have this week in Dartmouth, Columbia. But I really want to focus on a quarterback room story that's not really being talked about enough. So Dartmouth may be the first undefeated team ever to have such a staunch quarterback controversy, despite being undefeated after playing multiple games. The last few years, they ran a dual quarterback system where one would be the bruising runner, like Nick Howard, if you remember from a few years ago, and the other would be the pocket passer. This year, head coach Sammy McCorkle decided that that wasn't necessary this year, and Jackson Proctor was going to be the starter. Then, for really like no obvious reason, they made the change to Grayson Saunier being the starter, who's not a dual quarterback system. It was just a distinct change in starter for the Yale game, right? They didn't play both; they just played Saunier. Dartmouth went down 30-7. They didn't waver in their decision. They kept Saunier out there, and he led a comeback, which was the largest of the FCS season so far. So I'm fascinated, obviously, for the implications of the game, but also just to watch this whole Dartmouth quarterback room. I don't understand what's going on personally. I maybe you do, but for someone that just kind of found all of this out after the fact, it's like I don't know why they made the change. I don't know why they stuck with Saunier when they let him, he let them get down by 3 touchdowns, right? And then they write him out and he wins the game. So it's just chaos at Dartmouth.
Yeah, so I will say I do miss the Dartmouth two quarterback system because it was very quirky. I really like the run scheme too. The run scheme honestly was kind of I would say reminiscent of a single wing attack. A lot of motion, a lot of wing backs, a lot of great blocking for sure. And this was a thing for years under the late great Buddy Stevens. Rest in peace to Coach Stevens. Just an amazing figure in Ivy League football history. But I think it's interesting because I want to say that Proctor was injured, really, because if you look at the Yale game, Woods Ray, their other backup quarterback, came in. And I think Proctor has sat out the past couple of games. I don't know if you research anything about an injury, but I want to see that might be why he's out. But Saunier is the hot hand, and he offers the most two-dimensional play of any Dartmouth quarterback I've seen in the last 6 years, honestly.
I couldn't find anything about it being an injury, and also what makes me think that it's not is that Proctor played the entire game the week before. I forget who they played. And then Saunier played the entire week following. There wasn't like no one came in mid-game or something like that. So unless it was on one of the very last plays, and I just can't find anything online. Then yeah, I don't know, but the whole thing is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree, but I think it's great to see Dartmouth have, I guess, a better passing game. I guess a more multi-dimensional quarterback because the past couple of years, like you said, passing situation quarterback and you had a running quarterback, which Nick Howard, the bruising quarterback, is at Butler doing great things as their Wildcat quarterback, which is just interesting to know that I found out a few weeks ago. But you know that Dartmouth's gonna love running the ball. They're gonna run the ball, but Columbia's defense is great. They're allowing 102 yards per game. They have two players, Hayden McDonald and Carter McFadden, that have 3 interceptions already. So don't count out the Lions. And also, too, Dartmouth has not looked great in non-conference play. They were down in the fourth quarter to Central Connecticut State of the NEC. They were down in the fourth quarter. In fact, the final minutes against Merrimack, a former NEC school and now independent. So Dartmouth is very close to being 3-2 with 2 losses to NEC/ former NEC school. So Columbia gets them at the N Stadium in Manhattan. I think this is an opportunistic time, especially in a year where there is so much parity And this is how you know it feels like 2007 2.0, where Columbia has a chance to win it just its second Ivy League title ever because of the power vacuum at the top of the Ivy League. Where I think Columbia is the lone under, or is Columbia and Dartmouth are the two lone conference unbeatens. Yeah, excuse me, Columbia and Dartmouth are the two lone conference unbeatens in the Ivy League. So I think this might be Columbia's year. Only one Ivy League title ever, and that came in 1961. And yeah, I mean, I'm just excited for this. I'm really excited too because I'll be seeing this Columbia team as well in November as part of the Notre Dame Navy or Notre Dame Army trip. So definitely must see TV right there. For my last game of the weekend, I have Nevada at Hawaii at midnight, midnight Eastern time. And I'm not just saying that because of the late start time, but if there is any team that has had the most surprising rise, I would say it's Nevada. And I know in week zero, when we talked about them at SMU, we were very mum. We talked about how this is a very unfortunate situation, how it is a deep rebuild, but Brendan Lewis said not so fast, and they almost beat SMU week zero, and that was impressive at the time. And we thought maybe it was SMU kind of just coming out of the season slow, not taking Nevada seriously. But no, Nevada has had some great performances, including a win at home against Oregon State to show the Pac 2 that, or the Pac 12 that, hey, like we're legit. We deserve consideration too. Not that Nevada was playing into the Pac 12. But it was just a big statement win, not just for Nevada, but for the Mountain West. And Brendan Lewis is playing the best football of his career. He had 151 yards on only 9 carries against Oregon State. He was slowed down a little bit on the ground, but he passed the ball efficiently against Fresno State, a game that they nearly won. Fresno State had a rally come from behind in the fourth quarter in that one. But the key thing about Nevada is because of the Hawaii exemption, they played 13 games. So right now they're 3-5. They still have UNLV. They still have Boise State on the schedule, but they have three winnable games: Colorado State, Air Force, who has looked dreadful this year, and this week against Hawaii. So we're likely to have not enough bowl teams. So with Nevada taking advantage of the Hawaii exemption, they would be the first team off the board should there not be enough bowl eligible teams. And what a boost this would be for a program that has looked miserable the past couple years for them to reach a bowl in early on in Ken Wilson's tenure. Or sorry, it's not Ken Wilson, geez. But early on in their new coach's tenure. But just a great game, honestly, for bowl implications because Nevada has the Hawaii exemption, and I do think there won't be enough bowl eligible teams, and I think they can beat Colorado State too. Like Colorado State had a lot of hype behind them, but they have not impressed me through much of the year, to be honest with you. So Nevada, Hawaii, midnight on the Team One Sports app on your cell phone. Be sure to tune in and yeah, watch Brendan Lewis cook.
And Nevada as well, man. Savion Red, their running back there. Man, he is actually he's a transfer from Texas, remember? Where he was actually a wide receiver, and then he made the move to running back, and then he transferred to Nevada. And so you've seen Nevada use Savion in the passing game a little bit. I think he usually has a few receptions in every game. And then he's had a few carries, and then against Fresno State he really popped off and got 23 carries for the game and that's where he had that four touchdown game, if you remember that from a couple weeks ago. But yeah, man, it's a great Nevada offense. Well, I can't say great when they only have 3 wins, but man, like it's a solid offense.
Yeah, they're multidimensional. They can hurt you in multiple ways running the ball. Like I said, like Brendan Lewis, and also too, they like if I think there's hardly any other team that has benefited in the backfield more from the transfer portal than Nevada, because they not only have Savion Red, but they have Pat Garwo, who I before the season a lot of people thought would be the feature back. Um, but he adds depth. After all, Garwo ran for 1,000 yards in 2021 for Boston College. But just there's so much depth in that backfield, and when they have the pieces moving, they didn't really have the pieces moving against Fresno State. It's really fun to watch, and it's fun to see Brandon Lewis comfortable in an offense, unlike he was at Colorado. So I'm excited for that one. Definitely, hopefully, I can stay up late enough for that one with it being at 10 o'clock local time. But I think I should be able to make it. I think the wife will be okay with it.
Hey, that or your flight just gets delayed a little bit, right? And then you have nothing else to do. So
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
For my last game of the week, how can I not go with Notre Dame Navy, man? You'll be there. It's noon Saturday on ABC. Try and bring me from snacks from the press box if you can afterward. But man, no, it's gonna be a great game. I'm excited for you. One player that I just wanted to talk just a little bit about, Navy running back Eli Heidenrich. He's averaging 21 yards per reception. There isn't another running back in the FBS that's averaging more than 15 yards per reception. So when they get Eli Heidenrich involved in the passing game, it's great. I'm sure you have some other notes on the game, but man, I'm pumped to watch it.
Yeah, Heidenreich honestly is having one of the best receiving seasons for a Navy player in general. Can't even say receiver because he's a slot back. He's a snipe, as they call him. So he is very fun to watch, very multidimensional. Was the first Navy player to have 100 and 100 receiving and rushing in a game. So it should be fun to watch as well. But, we already covered with Blake Horvath and everything. The defense was impressive. Deshaun Peel had two pick sixes against Charlotte. So we saw Northern Illinois put pressure on Riley Leonard and give him trouble. So we'll see if Navy follows the same blueprint, if they're able to push that to success. But there's not much else to be said that we haven't covered already. Great to see it on noon. Great to see it being a nationally relevant game, with this being one of the oldest and most continuous intersectional rivalries in college football. With this changing landscape in college football, we need games like Notre Dame Navy to remain important just for what they stand, their history behind them, and just the look to the past that they give us.
Absolutely, man. No, it's great. Football is college football is more fun when teams are like, Navy, Army, Notre Dame are important to the storyline of the sport, right? And we haven't had that in a while. So it's fun to have that. So, Omar, anything else before we hop off?
No, I forgot to mention too with the Columbia game that the reason I'm wearing this funny jersey is this is a 1933 throwback to when they went to the Rose Bowl. So just the one piece of Columbia gear that I have for this team, which I feels like a special year for the Lions. So I forgot to mention that, but I don't have anything else.
I live like 20 minutes away from Kraft Field, where they play. So at some point, I need to make it down there for a game. But
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, thanks everyone for watching and for listening. Until next time, everyone. Peace, love, and soul, and Burger Popper.